Before tonight's story begins, let me invite you to subscribe to Nap Giggles if you enjoy these cozy bedtime tales. And tell me in the comments, have you ever ended up chatting with strangers in a queue and leaving with more stories than groceries? Now then, this was meant to be an ordinary shopping trip, a quick in and out, a list, a trolley, a dash for the biscuits aisle. But somewhere between the slow shuffle of the queue and the oddly dramatic beeping of the checkout scanner, something happened. I made friends, real, temporary, queue-only friends, the kind you laugh with for 10 minutes and never see again, but somehow remember for years. So tonight, let me tell you the story of the day I went shopping with my wife and made friends in the queue. You know those Saturdays where you wake up and think, this is it. This is the day I finally do nothing? That was me. I had a plan. A simple plan. A little breakfast, maybe some TV. Then a nap that would roll neatly into lunch, maybe even another nap after that. Nothing fancy. Just the quiet satisfaction of wasting time in peace. And then my wife walked in holding a shopping list. Not a small, innocent list. A list that looked like it could be submitted as evidence in court. It had bullet points, subcategories, and what I swear were references to other lists. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She told me, "You're coming with me." Now, if you've ever been in a long-term relationship, you know that tone. It's not really a suggestion. It's more like a weather forecast. It's happening whether you like it or not. I tried to protest. I pointed out how tired I was. She reminded me that I'd napped yesterday. I argued that today was a different kind of tired. She didn't even blink. And that's how my dream of a lazy Saturday turned into a field trip to the supermarket. Now, you need to understand something. My wife shops with precision. She approaches it the way Napoleon approached battle. Strategy, formations, contingency plans. She had her list organized by aisle. By aisle. I didn't even know there was a correct order to collect cereal and toothpaste. Apparently there is. Meanwhile, my own shopping style can be described as impulse with a hint of chaos. If I see something I like, I buy it. End of strategy. That's it. My system has never failed me, mainly because I've never attempted to plan beyond snacks and the occasional frozen pizza. So there I was, reluctantly putting on my shoes as she checked the list for the 15th time. She tucked coupons into a special little pouch like a poker player shuffling her cards. Meanwhile, I was standing there wondering if pajamas counted as appropriate shopping attire. Apparently, they don't. The first disagreement came before we even left the house. I suggested we only needed a basket, not a cart. After all, how much could two people possibly need in 1 week? She stared at me as if I'd suggested we try grocery shopping with a wheelbarrow. "A basket?" she said. "We're restocking the pantry." "We need a cart. A big cart." I mumbled something about overkill, but she was already halfway to the car. On the drive over, she gave me the rundown of the day's objectives: milk, bread, vegetables, the mysterious category she calls pantry essentials. I asked if pantry essentials included chocolate-covered pretzels. She said no. I asked about jalapeno chips. Also number. I tried with ice cream sandwiches. Still no. By the time we parked, I had been outvoted 3-0 by her, the list, and the coupon pouch. Walking through the sliding glass doors, I felt a bit like a prisoner being escorted into a facility. Except in this case, the prison guards were holding reusable tote bags. She grabbed a cart. I prayed for a silent, smooth one. Instead, I got the squeaky-wheeled beast that pulled violently to the left. Of course. "Push harder with your right hand," she advised. "I'm trying," I said, "but I think it has a mind of its own." We may end up in the parking lot again." She rolled her eyes and marched toward the produce section. I followed, wrestling the cart like a cowboy breaking in a wild horse. And that, my friend, is how my quiet Saturday nap turned into the opening act of what would become the strangest and most unexpectedly social shopping trip of my life. But before all that queue business, and we'll get there, let me take you through the ordeal of getting started. Because in the world of shopping with my wife, even the warm-up lap is a marathon. She started with apples, not just any apples, specific apples. She inspected each one like a jeweler checking diamonds. Meanwhile, I was already yawning. I thought about sneaking off to the bakery for a muffin, but the cart was stuck under her guard. I was tethered to it, a prisoner of produce. Every time she placed an item in the cart, I tried slipping in something of my own. A bag of cheese puffs here, a jar of salsa there. Each time she removed it without looking, like a magician revealing a trick. I don't know how she does it. She has some sixth sense for snack sabotage. By the time we left the fruit section, she was satisfied and I was already exhausted. And yet, it was only the beginning. The aisles stretched before us like endless corridors in a maze. She had her list. I had my squeaky cart. And destiny had a strange sense of humor. Because little did I know, the most memorable part of that day wouldn't be the apples, or the squeaky wheel, or even my failed attempts at snack smuggling. The real story, the one I'm telling you now, would happen much later in the dreaded checkout line. But we weren't there yet. Oh no. We had many aisles, many misadventures, and many debates about yogurt flavors to survive first. And so began the day I thought I lost to shopping, but somehow gained a queue full of friends instead. The automatic doors slid open with a dramatic whoosh, and I swear it felt like we were stepping into another world. Some people call it the supermarket. I call it the jungle. The air was thick with competing smells, fresh bread from the bakery, a wave of detergent from the cleaning aisle, and somewhere in the distance, that suspiciously strong perfume cloud that clings to the cosmetic section. My nose couldn't keep up. It was like being attacked by a buffet. Our cart, of course, squeaked in protest as soon as we crossed the threshold. Every push sounded like a mouse trapped inside the wheels crying for help. People turned to look. My wife pretended not to notice. I gave the cart a little pat, hoping it might behave. It didn't. We hadn't made it 20 feet before the distraction started. To the left, a pyramid of oranges stacked so high it looked like an engineering experiment. To the right, the bakery section with pastries glistening under the lights like forbidden treasure. And straight ahead, the seasonal aisle. Now, the seasonal aisle is my kryptonite. It's full of things nobody really needs but everybody secretly wants. Inflatable flamingo lamps, Halloween mugs in March, garden gnomes that look suspiciously judgmental. I could spend hours in there, marveling at objects that would never fit in my house but somehow feel essential in the moment. "Keep moving," my wife said, steering us firmly toward the produce section. She didn't even glance at the flamingo lamp. How does she do that? How does she resist? I swear the flamingo winked at me as we passed. Produce was her territory. She marched straight to the apples again, as if we hadn't already spent 10 minutes evaluating them last week. I, meanwhile, tried to make myself useful by grabbing a bunch of bananas. Simple task, right? Wrong. I picked the wrong shade of yellow, too green apparently. Back they went. I reached for another bunch, too many brown spots. Back again. Finally, she selected her own bananas, and I was demoted to cart-pushing duty once more. That squeaky wheel screamed louder in the silence of the fruit section. It pulled left every time I tried to steer straight. At one point, I nearly ran over a display of kiwis. A woman gave me a look that said, "Control your vehicle, sir." I gave her an apologetic nod as though the cart was a disobedient dog. We rolled onward, deeper into the jungle. Next came the cereal aisle. This, I thought, was my chance. She was busy comparing nutritional labels, fiber content, sugar percentages, words I've never seen outside of a science textbook. Meanwhile, I spotted a glorious box of sugar-frosted something, the kind of cereal that makes dentists rich. I casually slipped it into the cart. Without even looking, she plucked it back out and returned it to the shelf. "How did you even see that?" I asked. "I always see," she replied. I swear she has eyes in the back of her head. By the time we reached the bread section, my energy was draining fast. Rows of loaves stared back at me like a carb army. Rye, whole wheat, multigrain, something called ancient grain that sounded like it was harvested during the Roman Empire. I grabbed one at random, only to be told it was the wrong one, because it didn't fit the week's meal plan. Back it went. I was starting to feel like a contestant in a game show I didn't sign up for. Then came the chaos of the frozen aisle. It always feels colder than necessary, like the store is storing penguins back there. I volunteered to grab a bag of peas. Easy. Except when I pulled one out, 3 more bags toppled forward and hit the floor in a mini avalanche. A kid nearby clapped as if I'd just performed a stunt. My wife sighed, picked up the bags, and gave me that "you're not helping" look. At this point, she decided to test me with a fetch mission. She handed me the sacred list and pointed at an item. Gluten-free baking powder. Blue lid. Not green lid. She may as well have told me to find the Holy Grail. I wandered off on my quest. The aisles stretched endlessly, each one more confusing than the last. I found dog food. I found fish food. I found plant food. I was starting to think maybe baking powder was just a myth. At one point, I confidently approached a woman from behind, thinking it was my wife, and started complaining about our squeaky cart. She turned around. Not my wife. Definitely not my wife. I muttered an apology and fled before she called security. After 10 minutes of searching, I returned empty-handed. My wife had already found the baking powder herself. She didn't even look angry, just mildly disappointed, which is worse. The cart, now loaded with vegetables, bread, and mysterious pantry items, was heavier than before. The squeaky wheels screamed louder under the pressure. People started giving us sympathetic glances like I was leading a wounded animal through the store. By the time we hit the dairy section, I was ready to wave the white flag. Yogurt debates began. Strawberry or peach, low-fat or full-fat, Greek or regular. I don't think I've ever been less qualified to make decisions in my life. I just nodded at whatever she picked. At that point, survival was my only strategy. And so, after what felt like 3 days, but was really only 40 minutes, we finally turned a corner. And there it was. The finish line. The checkout. Or so I thought. Because what waited for us, there was no ordinary line. It was a queue so long, so epic, so packed with characters that it would change the entire course of my day. But that's a story for later. For now, all you need to know is this. We entered the jungle, we survived the aisles, and we emerged with a cart that squeaked like a choir of mice. And my wife still hadn't let a single forbidden snack through. The true battle, however, was still ahead. By this point, the cart was heavy. I'm not saying it was full, I'm saying it was dense. Each item seemed to weigh 10 pounds. A bag of flour, a gallon of milk, jars of pasta sauce that felt like they were forged from lead. I pushed, I groaned, and the squeaky wheel screamed louder than ever. People started stepping aside, not because they were polite, but because they didn't trust me not to mow them down. "Can you push it straighter?" my wife asked, as though I hadn't already been wrestling the cart like it was a mechanical bull. "It's not me," I said. "It's the wheel. The wheel has chosen its own path. Then choose harder." We reached the pasta aisle, and here the trials truly began. My wife wanted spaghetti, easy. Except the store had an entire wall of pasta. Spaghetti, linguine, fettuccine, penne, macaroni. Noodles so specific they sounded like Italian opera singers. I stood there staring at the shelf, and my brain short-circuiting. "Which one?" I asked. "Regular spaghetti." "Regular as in thin? Thick? Whole wheat? Organic? Imported?" She sighed, reached over and pulled the correct box in 1 second. I swear she has a built-in grocery GPS. Meanwhile, I noticed a display of gourmet ravioli, cheese-filled, mushroom-filled, something called pumpkin sage, which honestly sounded like a candle flavor. I reached for it. She raised an eyebrow. I put it back. Lesson learned. Next trial, the condiment aisle. Condiments are a trap. They promise flavor and excitement, but mostly just take up space in the fridge until they expire. We already had 3 bottles of mustard at home. Still, I found myself drawn to a spicy mango ketchup that was 100% unnecessary. "Put it down," my wife said without even turning her head. "How do you keep catching me?" "I told you." I started wondering if supermarkets should issue body cameras for spouses, just so we could review the footage later and see where exactly I went wrong. But the real test came in the snack aisle. Oh, the snack aisle. Glorious towers of chips, cookies stacked like bricks, candy bars lined up like soldiers, whispering promises of sugar highs. My inner child, who had been quiet all morning, suddenly woke up and started jumping up and down. "Can we get just one thing?" I pleaded. "One snack." She gave me a long, thoughtful look. "Fine." One reader. I've never felt so much pressure in my life. I had to choose the snack, the one snack that would represent my hopes, dreams, and taste buds for the entire week. I paced the aisle like a general surveying his troops. Doritos, too obvious. Chocolate chip cookies, classic but predictable. Beef jerky, adventurous but risky. Finally, I picked a family-sized bag of sour cream and onion chips. It felt right. It felt bold. It felt like victory. She looked at it, looked at me, and placed it gently into the cart. I had won a small battle, a tiny victory. And I celebrated silently as the squeaky wheel screamed its way down the next aisle. But of course, victories in the supermarket don't last long. In the cleaning supplies aisle, my wife stopped to compare detergents. She held up 2 nearly identical bottles and asked, "Which one do you think smells fresher?" Now, this is a trick question. I know it is. I smelled both. They smelled exactly the same. Exactly. But if I admitted that, I'd lose credibility. So I said, "This one smells fresher," and pointed to the left bottle. Wrong answer. She picked the other one. My opinion had been a formality. I was merely there to provide contrast. By now, I had given up all hope of influencing the shopping process. I focused only on steering the squeaky beast through the aisles, without injuring anyone. Children stared. Elderly shoppers glared. At one point, a man actually stepped aside and said, "Go ahead, you've got the fast lane." I wanted to tell him, "No, sir, this is the broken wheel lane." And then came the beverage section. If you've never seen 2 adults debate bottled water, let me tell you, it's an experience. sparkling or still, with minerals or without, spring or purified. At one point, I suggested we just fill up bottles at home and call it a day. The look I got could have curdled milk. I stood silently after that. Finally, at long last, we turned the final corner. The cart was full. The list was nearly complete. My back hurt. My patience was thin. But there, in the distance, shone the bright lights of salvation, the checkout. Except salvation was not what we found. What we found was a queue that stretched so far, I half expected to see people camping with tents and lawn chairs. Children were crying. A man in front of us had at least 3 carts worth of items. The cashier looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, destiny had prepared something entirely unexpected for me. But that, my friend, is the next chapter. For now, just know this. I survived the trials in the aisles. I smuggled in one glorious bag of chips, and my wife still hadn't allowed the pumpkin sage ravioli. A win is a win. I swear the line stretched from the registers all the way back to the frozen peas. People were stacked in single-file formation, carts overflowing, faces etched with resignation. You could almost hear a collective sigh, like an orchestra of boredom. "This won't take long," my wife said optimistically, which, in marriage language, translates to prepare for an eternity. So we parked ourselves at the end of the line. The squeaky wheel gave one last dramatic cry and stopped. And that's when I looked up and realized we weren't just standing in a queue. We were standing in a little society, a temporary neighborhood held together by mutual suffering. And I was about to meet the locals. The toddler negotiator. Directly in front of us was a young mother with a toddler sitting in the cart. The toddler held a box of cookies like it was a sacred relic. The mother, however, kept shaking her head. "No, we're putting them back," she said firmly. The toddler stared at her with wide, innocent eyes. Then, in a voice that could melt glaciers, whispered, "Please." I braced myself. You see, toddlers don't ask. They negotiate. The mother stood her ground. "We have cookies at home." The toddler's eyes narrowed. The box of cookies was lifted high above her head like Simba in The Lion King. The threat was clear. Accept my terms or witness chaos. People in line were watching now. Some were silently rooting for the toddler. Others were cheering on the mother. It was like a courtroom drama. Finally, the mother sighed, muttered, "Fine, but just this once," and tossed the cookies into the cart. The toddler smiled triumphantly, as if she just won a Nobel Prize. I wanted to clap, but decided against it. I didn't want to encourage future rebellions. The coupon general behind us stood an older man with a stack of coupons so thick it looked like a deck of playing cards. He wore reading glasses which he kept sliding down his nose and muttered to himself as he organized his collection. "Buy 2, get 1 free. That's for the beans. Double points on Wednesdays. Today's Saturday. Blast. No, wait, that's still valid." He flipped through them with the precision of a card shark in Vegas. I half expected him to shuffle and deal them out to the rest of us. At one point, he leaned forward and whispered, "Do you know if this store does price matching?" I shrugged. Maybe?" He nodded seriously. "Good. I'll test them." Test them? Was this man running experiments on the supermarket staff? I leaned back toward my wife. "We might be here a while. This guy's preparing for battle." She glanced over, saw the coupon stack, and gave a knowing nod. God help the cashier. The overshare. 2 carts ahead stood a middle-aged man on his phone. And when I say on his phone, I mean the entire queue could hear both sides of his conversation. Yeah, doctor says it's not gout this time, he announced proudly. Just my foot acting up. Yeah, it swelled up like a balloon. Looked like Shrek's foot. You should have seen it. Everyone in line exchanged glances. Nobody wanted details, but we were all trapped in the same unwilling podcast. He continued, and then the dog ate half the lasagna off the counter. Whole thing gone. Wife wasn't happy, I tell you that. Yeah, I'll send pictures. No, not of my foot, of the dog. At that point, I almost admired his commitment. Overshares are like radio stations. You don't tune in, they just play. The cart strategist. Further up the line, there was a man meticulously organizing his cart as though preparing for an Olympic event. Boxes were stacked by size, cans rotated so the labels all faced outward, frozen items grouped together like soldiers on parade. I couldn't look away. He was so precise. At one point, he actually pulled out a level, an actual carpenter's level, and adjusted a pack of butter to sit evenly. Is he measuring butter? I whispered. Yes, my wife said without looking up. Don't stare. But he has a system. Don't. Encourage. Him. But I was fascinated. His cart looked like a magazine spread. Ours, meanwhile, looked like we'd just swept random items off shelves during a fire drill. The philosopher right about. Then, the man directly in front of me turned around and sighed. Funny thing about lines, he said. I blinked. Was he talking to me? They say waiting teaches patience, he continued, nodding sagely. But I think it teaches observation. Look around. Every person here is a story, a moment, a slice of humanity. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I nodded politely. You see that man with the coupons? He asked. Yeah. He's clinging to control. In a world of chaos, coupons give him order. I glanced nervously at the coupon general, who was currently blowing dust off a 2017 voucher for canned tuna. The philosopher wasn't wrong. And that child with the cookies, that's the human spirit, resilient, defiant, unwilling to compromise. I smiled awkwardly. The philosopher looked at me with warm eyes. And you, friend? You're here because love brought you, not for groceries, for your wife. You're a poet of patience. Before I could explain that I was more hostage than poet, the line moved forward. The philosopher faced front again, leaving me to ponder whether I'd just been complimented or diagnosed. The queue bonding begins. Something strange happens when a group of strangers waits together long enough. Barriers drop. We all started talking. The toddler's mother rolled her eyes and said, "If she eats those cookies before dinner, I give up." The coupon general chuckled. Better than trying to feed them peas. Even the oversharer paused his phone call long enough to say, "My kid once ate Play-Doh. Thought it was candy. Whole rainbow pack." We laughed, actual laughter, right there in the middle of the supermarket. The philosopher nodded approvingly, as though we had passed some kind of spiritual test. The cart strategist remained silent, of course, but I'm pretty sure he adjusted a can of soup just to hide his smile. The great checkout crawl minutes turned into more minutes, maybe hours. Time in the queue is slippery like that, but slowly, steadily, we shuffled forward. Each step brought us closer to the cashier, closer to freedom. But nobody seemed in a hurry anymore. We were too busy chatting, sharing stories, making sarcastic comments about which register was moving faster, betting silently on who would break down and grab a candy bar from the impulse rack first. At one point, the toddler offered me a cookie from her sacred box. I accepted. It was the sweetest cookie I'd ever tasted, not because of the sugar, but because it was earned through shared suffering. In the cashier's fate. Finally, we reached the front. The coupon general marched forward, coupons in hand like a knight with his sword. The poor cashier's eyes widened as the stack hit the counter. "Buy 2, get 1 free," the general declared. "These are for a different store," she replied. "They said price matching." "That was in 2015, sir." The battle raged on. The rest of us watched like spectators at a sporting event. The toddler clapped. The oversharer live commentated into his phone. The philosopher whispered, "This is the dance of commerce." Eventually, the general conceded, muttering about conspiracies, and shuffled away. Our turn had come. But the unlikely friendship. As we unloaded our cart, I realized something. These people, strangers just an hour ago, felt like neighbors now. The toddler waved at me with cookie crumbs on her face. The philosopher gave me a solemn nod as though blessing my future. The oversharer shouted, "Good luck with your cart, buddy," while still mid-foot story. And when we finally paid, and the squeaky wheel made its last dramatic cry as we rolled out of the store, I felt lighter. Not just because we'd spent money, but because waiting in that line hadn't just been waiting. It had been connecting. Ridiculous, funny, human. And as my wife handed me a bag to carry, she said, "See? Shopping wasn't so bad I didn't argue. Not this time." Because somehow, in the most boring place imaginable, I'd made a few friends, even if I'd never see them again. The thing about finally reaching the cashier after what feels like a lifetime in the queue is that your brain does a funny thing. It convinces you the ordeal is almost over. But oh no, the checkout is not the finish line. It is its own arena, its own battlefield, its own last trial of the soul. As we rolled up to the conveyor belt, our squeaky wheel groaning in protest like an old sailor on his last voyage, I felt a cautious optimism. We'd made it. We'd survived the aisles. We'd bonded with strangers. Surely now, all that was left was a quick scan of barcodes, a swipe of a card, and freedom. I could not have been more wrong. The conveyor belt Olympics. "Start unloading," my wife said briskly. Simple enough, except suddenly it felt like a timed event. The couple ahead of us had barely finished bagging their groceries, and already the cashier was clearing space for our items. I panicked. I started grabbing things out of the cart at random. A box of cereal, a bag of onions, a frozen pizza, a lone cucumber that had been buried under the milk. I threw them onto the conveyor belt in no particular order, just hoping speed would save me. "Not like that," my wife hissed. "What do you mean?" "You have to group them. Cold things together, fragile things last. Don't put the bread under the canned soup." I looked down. Sure enough, the loaf of bread was currently being smothered by a family-sized can of beans. It looked like a crime scene. "I'll fix it," I muttered, trying to rearrange things on the moving belt. Of course, the belt kept moving, so I was essentially chasing my mistakes in slow motion. The cashier raised an eyebrow. My wife sighed. The toddler 2 customers behind us shouted, "He squished the bread," as though narrating a live disaster broadcast. By the time I had sorted cold from dry and fragile from sturdy, the damage was done. My bread was flat. My ego flatter. The impulse shelf temptations. As I tried to recover, I noticed the impulse shelf. You know the one. Those rows of candy bars, gum, batteries, mystery gadgets, and magazines with headlines like "The Secret Foods That Will Make You Immortal." it called to me. "Look," I whispered, "we could get a Snickers." "No," my wife said firmly, or lip balm. "We could always use more lip balm." "No." "Ooh, travel-sized lint roller, perfect for emergencies." She turned and gave me the look, the same look she'd used when I tried to sneak pumpkin sage ravioli into the cart. The look that said, "I see everything." I placed the lint roller back. The cashier smirked. The barcode blues. Now came the scanning. Beep, 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 the rhythm of commerce. Except not everything wanted to cooperate. The jar of pasta sauce refused to scan. The cashier tried once, twice, 3 times, no luck. She typed in the code manually, sighed, and muttered something about these labels never working. Then the bananas. Oh, the bananas. You see, bananas don't have barcodes. They have stickers with tiny numbers. The cashier squinted, peeled off the sticker, typed it in wrong, and suddenly the screen declared we had purchased 47 pounds of bananas. I said gently. "We only have 4 bananas." She groaned, deleted, retyped, and finally corrected it. Happens all the time. Meanwhile, the coupon general, who was still nearby packing his spoils, shook his head knowingly. "Amateurs," he muttered. The bagging debacle. Then came the bagging. Oh, the bagging. Some stores have professional baggers. This one did not. Here, it was up to you, the customer, to load your own bags while the cashier continued scanning relentlessly as though in a race against humanity. My wife was a pro. She had a system, heavy items at the bottom, fragile on top, cold with cold, pantry with pantry, smooth, efficient, elegant. Me. I had chaos. I stuffed items into bags like I was playing Tetris blindfolded. I put eggs next to canned beans. I buried apples under laundry detergent. At one point, I tried to fit a frozen pizza into a bag clearly too small for it. The corners tore through. The cashier winced. My wife gasped. The toddler cheered. Just let me do it," my wife said finally, gently removing the bag from my hands like I was a toddler myself. I stepped aside, humbled. For the price, shock. Then, the moment of truth. The total. The cashier pressed a eBay button, the register beeped, and the number appeared on the screen. I swear I heard dramatic music. The total was astronomical. A figure so high it could fund a small nation. I blinked. My wife nodded calmly, like she had expected it. "Did we buy a car and I didn't notice?" I whispered. "Groceries are expensive," she said matter-of-factly. "But this is rent money," she shrugged. "Welcome to adulthood." I handed over the card like a man surrendering his life savings. The card catastrophe. And of course, the card machine had to play games. "Insert card," it said. I inserted. "Remove card." I removed. "Insert card again." I inserted again. "Error." "Try again." People behind us sighed. I felt sweat forming on my forehead. I inserted, removed, inserted again. The machine beeped angrily. "Try tapping it," the cashier suggested. I tapped. "Error, insert card." At this point, I was convinced the machine was sentient and mocking me. Finally, on the 5th attempt, it went through. The screen flashed, approved. The crowd behind us silently celebrated. The toddler clapped. I nearly wept with relief. Off the loyalty card saga. "Do you have a loyalty card?" the cashier asked. Oh no, we did. Somewhere. My wife dug through her purse, muttering, "Receipts, lipstick, A pen, no card. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through apps, forgot the password, reset the password, waited for a verification code. The line behind us groaned. The overshare announced into his phone, "We're stuck. Lady can't find her loyalty card." Finally, after what felt like 3 ice ages, she found it. The cashier scanned it. We saved 37 cents. Totally worth it. The receipt scroll. The receipt that printed was not a receipt. It was a scroll, a novella, a tapestry of transactions that could wallpaper an entire room. It kept printing and printing and printing. I half expected the cashier to hand me a backpack just to carry it. "Do people actually read these?" I asked. My wife said, "Yes." For the savings, I held up the scroll like a medieval proclamation. "Hear ye, hear ye. We have saved 37 cents. The toddler laughed. The coupon general looked offended. With the great escape. Finally, it was over. Bags packed, receipt scroll in hand, sanity barely intact. We rolled the squeaky cart out of the checkout and toward the automatic doors. And oh, the sunlight, the glorious, blinding sunlight. It felt like emerging from a cave after a lifetime underground. The air outside tasted fresher. The world looked brighter. "We survived," I whispered. "Barely," my wife replied. The cart squeaked one last heroic squeak, and together we pushed it across the parking lot like survivors returning from war. The post-battle reflection. On the drive home, bags of groceries stacked around me, I thought about what had just happened. Supermarket shopping isn't just buying food. It's a test of patience, of teamwork, of marriage, of humanity itself. And though I had stumbled, flattened bread, torn pizza boxes, embarrassed myself with the impulse shelf, I had also learned. I'd learned that strangers can become companions in a queue, that a toddler with cookies can unite a crowd, that my wife is always right about grocery systems, and most importantly, that the squeaky wheel, though annoying, had been with me every step of the journey. A loyal, if screechy, companion. And so, as we pulled into the driveway, I declared with solemn pride, "Next week we're ordering takeout." My wife laughed. "We'll see." And I knew then this saga was far from over. When we got home from the supermarket, I thought the ordeal was over. The squeaky cart was gone. The queue was behind us. The receipt scroll had been folded away like a sacred text. But what no one tells you is this: the real final boss of grocery shopping isn't the aisles, or the checkout, or even the loyalty card. It's the unloading. The parking lot shuffle. First, of course, there's the parking lot shuffle. Lugging heavy grocery bags from the cart to the car is a cardio workout disguised as everyday life. My arms stretched so far under the weight that I felt like a circus act. One bag contained milk, flour, and laundry detergent, all in one. Who packed that? Spoiler, me during my chaotic bagging phase. "Careful with the eggs," my wife warned. I looked down. The egg carton was balanced on top of the milk jug, tilted at a 45-degree angle, defying gravity like a daredevil stuntman. "Everything's fine," I said. A yoke of doom dripped ominously from the corner. The drive of quiet reflection. The drive home was quiet, not the kind of tense, silent drive after an argument, just the silence of two people who had been through battle together. My wife stared out the window, probably cataloging the meals she could cook from our haul. I stared straight ahead, replaying every embarrassing moment in my mind. The bread I crushed, the pizza bag I tore, the impulse shelf lint roller incident, the toddler shouting, "He squished the bread," like it was breaking news. But amidst the shame, there was also pride. We had survived. We had made it through. And though my dignity had taken a few hits, I was strangely content. The unloading gauntlet back home, we faced the next trial. Unloading the groceries. Now, you'd think unloading would be easier than shopping. You're not navigating aisles, not arguing about ravioli, not dealing with barcodes. But no, unloading has its own set of challenges. Step 1. Carrying the bags inside. My wife somehow carried 4 bags on each arm like a superhero. I tried to match her. My fingers went numb within seconds. By the time I stumbled to the kitchen, my arms felt like they had been stretched in medieval torture devices. Step 2. Fridge Tetris. We had bought far more food than our fridge could handle. Every shelf was already half full. I opened the door and stared into the abyss. Where, exactly, was the gallon of milk supposed to go? Or the 3 tubs of yogurt? Or the inexplicably large watermelon my wife had picked out because it looked fresh? "Just make it fit," she said. That's like telling someone to just make world peace. Easier said than done. I shoved, rearranged, and stacked until the fridge looked like a precarious game of Jenga. One wrong move and everything would collapse. Step 3. The pantry. This was my domain. Or, so I thought. I proudly stacked the cereal boxes, lined up the pasta, and arranged the chips in a neat row. Then, my wife walked in, took one look, and said, "That's not how it goes." She proceeded to reorganize everything I had just done. Apparently, the correct system involves invisible categories like frequently used, backstock, and snack hierarchy. I sighed and stepped aside, demoted once again. "You're the first snack." Finally, the unloading was complete. The kitchen was stocked, the fridge groaning under the weight of our purchases. My arms felt like noodles, but my heart was light. "Let's take a break," my wife suggested. I reached immediately for my prize, the sour cream and onion chips, my one victory in the entire shopping saga. I tore the bag open, inhaled the glorious scent, and crunched the first chip like it was a medal ceremony. "Want some?" I asked, offering the bag. She smiled, took one chip, and said, "Good choice." Reader, in that moment I felt vindicated. The trials had been worth it. The receipt review ritual. Of course, peace didn't last long. My wife pulled out the receipt scroll. "I'm just going to check the prices," she said casually. "This, my friends, is not casual. This is a ritual, a sacred process." She unfurled the receipt like an ancient scroll, scanning each line with the precision of an archaeologist. "Pasta sauce, correct. Yogurt, correct. But wait, bananas. Did they charge us for organic?" I had flashbacks to the banana barcode fiasco, the 47-pound banana incident, the toddler laughing. My soul shuddered. "Yes," she said, "they charged us for organic. We didn't buy organic. That's an extra 12 cents per pound." "Are you saying we've been robbed?" She nodded gravely. "We'll get it fixed next time." I saluted the receipt. Never forget. The friends from the queue. That night, as I collapsed onto the couch, something strange happened. My phone buzzed. A message from the oversharer. Apparently, during our bonding in the queue, I had given him my number. I don't remember doing this, but there it was. "Great meeting you today," the message read. "We should all get together sometime, maybe a barbecue. I'll bring cookies." My wife says hi. I blinked. Was this friendship? Real friendship? From a queue? A second message popped up, this one from the coupon general. If you want, I can teach you my couponing system. You'll never pay full price again. And then a third, from the toddler's mom. Thanks for keeping him entertained. He keeps saying, squish the bread, and laughing. You're his new hero. I showed the messages to my wife. She smiled. See? You made friends I had. In the unlikeliest of places, the checkout line. Shot reflection. Lying in bed that night, I thought about the day. Shopping had seemed like a chore, an errand, something to endure. But somehow, it had turned into an adventure. I'd struggled, embarrassed myself, flattened bread and torn pizza boxes, but I had also laughed, bonded, made friends, and in the end, shared chips with my wife. Maybe that's the secret of grocery shopping. It's not just about food. It's about life, about patience, about teamwork, about finding humor in frustration, and about realizing that sometimes the people in the queue beside you aren't just strangers. They're potential allies. Back to the teaser for next time. As I drifted off to sleep, my wife whispered, "We'll need to go again next week." My eyes shot open. What? We'll be out of milk and bread and... No, I groaned. Never again. She chuckled. Don't worry. Next time you'll be ready. I wasn't sure if she was right, but one thing was certain. The next trip to the supermarket would be its own saga. And who knows, maybe the squeaky wheel would still be there, waiting for me. Closing thought, and so ends the tale of the day I went shopping with my wife and made friends in the queue. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was real. And in its own messy, hilarious, exhausting way, it was wonderful. Because sometimes the greatest adventures don't happen on mountaintops or in faraway lands. Sometimes they happen in the most ordinary places, like a supermarket aisle. And sometimes the people you meet in line while waiting to pay for your groceries can remind you that we're all in this together, one squeaky wheel at a time. You'd think that after 6,000 bags of groceries, after surviving squeaky carts, aisle debates, coupon generals, and bread-squishing scandals, we'd be done, finished, victorious. The fridge was groaning, the pantry was bursting, my arms were jelly. But no, because there's one universal law of grocery shopping. You always forget something. The realization. It happened about an hour after we finished unloading. My wife and I were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing. She was sipping tea. I was pretending to watch TV, but mostly staring into space, lost in my post-shopping recovery haze. Then she gasped. Not a little gasp, not the, "Oh, I forgot to water the plant" gasp. No, this was the dramatic gasp. The gasp that says, something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. What? I asked, immediately concerned. We forgot. The eggs. Silence. I blinked. No, that can't be. I distinctly remember wrestling a carton onto the milk jug in the cart. Yes, she said, but remember? That carton cracked. You said you'd get another one, did you? I replayed the memory. The cracked carton, the yolk dripping like a crime scene, my confident promise. Don't worry, I'll grab a new one. And then, the snack aisle, the chips, the distraction. Oh no, I whispered. We had done a full hour and a half of shopping and left without eggs. The panic now. In normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a disaster. We could live without eggs for a few days, right? Wrong. Because my wife had plans, big plans. The kind of plans that revolve around eggs like the sun revolves around the earth. Weekend breakfasts, baking, an omelet she had been talking about since Thursday. No eggs means no plan, she said gravely. No plan means chaos. And so, once again, the lazy Saturday I had dreamed of slipped further away. But the debate. We'll just go tomorrow, I suggested. No, she said, we need them tonight. But we were just there. I can't face that squeaky wheel again. I still have receipt PTSD. She raised an eyebrow. You're going back. That's when I made the classic mistake. I tried bargaining. What if we substitute? Pancakes without eggs, scrambled tofu, cereal. Her look could have frozen lava. There is no substitute, she said, and that was it. Case closed. With the return journey, back into the car I went, clutching the reusable bag like a knight gripping his sword. The sky outside had darkened, as if the universe itself knew what lay ahead. The drive felt longer this time, heavier. Every traffic light mocked me. Every radio ad reminded me of the comfort I had lost. When I finally pulled into the supermarket parking lot, I half expected the cart with the squeaky wheel to be waiting for me like a villain in a sequel. Round 2 in the jungle. The store felt different on the second trip. The morning rush was gone. The aisles were eerily quiet like a battlefield after the war. I marched straight toward the dairy section, determined. No distractions, no detours, just eggs, in and out, except I made eye contact with the coupon general. He was there, in the frozen aisle, comparing ice cream prices with the intensity of a stockbroker. He spotted me immediately. "Back again, soldier?" he called. I sighed. "Forgot the eggs." He nodded knowingly. "Happens to the best of us." Eggs are a common casualty. Before I knew it, he was telling me about his egg strategy, how to check for cracks, how to calculate cost per egg, even which brands had sturdier cartons. It was a masterclass I hadn't asked for, but somehow couldn't escape. By the time he was done, I was holding a carton like it was the Holy Grail. The surprise reunion. As I headed for the checkout, eggs in hand, I heard a familiar giggle. It was the toddler. "The bread man!" he shouted, pointing at me. I froze. His mom waved sheepishly. "Back again?" "Forgot the eggs?" I admitted. The toddler laughed so hard he almost fell out of the cart. He squished the bread and forgot the eggs. Fantastic. I had officially become a running gag in this child's life. The Yath Express Lane dilemma. Now came the question, which line? I had only one item, the eggs. A perfect express lane candidate, but fate, of course, had other plans. The express lane was closed, taped off, the light above it dark. I stared at it like a thirsty traveler staring at an empty well. That meant I had to join the regular line, behind a family with a cart that looked like they were preparing for the apocalypse. Towers of soda, mountains of canned beans, enough frozen pizzas to feed an army. I stood there, clutching my single carton of eggs, looking like the saddest, most inefficient shopper in history. The overshare spotted me from 2 lanes over. "Just eggs?" he called. "Just eggs," I confirmed. He gave me a thumbs up. Brave man. Here the humiliation and triumph. By the time I finally reached the cashier, I felt a mix of humiliation and triumph. She scanned the eggs. "That'll be $2.79. I handed over the money like a defeated warrior paying tribute. She bagged the carton carefully and slid it toward me. "Big shop today?" she asked, glancing at my single item. I didn't even answer, just took the eggs and walked away, dignity leaking out with every step. This the return home. Again. When I got back home, my wife was waiting at the door. She saw the carton and beamed. "You did it," she said, as if I'd just returned from a dangerous expedition. "Of course I did," I muttered. "I'm the egg hunter now." She kissed me on the cheek and took the carton like it was treasure. "See? That wasn't so bad." I collapsed onto the couch. Never again. But deep down, I knew the truth. It would happen again. Not eggs, maybe, but something. A spice, a condiment, toothpaste. The forgotten item fiasco is inevitable. It lurks in every shopping trip, waiting for its chance. And when it comes, I'll be ready, or at least slightly less unprepared. Reflection of the forgotten. As I finally settled down with my chips, still half full, thank you very much, I realized something. Yes, it was annoying. Yes, it was humiliating to go back for one item. Yes, I would forever be known as the bread squisher egg forgetter to a random toddler. But it was also kind of funny. The kind of story you laugh about later. The kind of hiccup that makes life a little less ordinary. And in the end, isn't that what it's all about? Laughing at the little fiascos. Finding humor in the ordinary. Realizing that sometimes the forgotten item is the thing that makes the day unforgettable. By the time I had recovered from the great egg quest, I thought the drama of the day was over. Surely the shopping saga had reached its natural conclusion. We had food. We had eggs. We had survived the aisles, the squeaky cart, the queue, the forgotten item fiasco. What more could possibly happen? The universe chuckled. The setup. The next morning, my wife suggested something unthinkable. "We should go back," she said. I blinked. Back? To the supermarket? We just survived it yesterday. I know, but I want to pick up some fresh bread, and maybe some fruit bread. Fruit? We bought enough yesterday to open a bakery and a smoothie shop. She gave me that look again, the one that ended arguments before they began. And so, back I went. Not even 24 hours after my egg humiliation, I was standing once again in that cursed parking lot. The encounter. I was walking toward the entrance, mentally preparing myself, when I heard a voice. "Hey, is that—" "No way, it is you." I turned, squinting against the morning sun. There, walking toward me with a grin big enough to split his face, was none other than Dave. Now, you don't know Dave yet, so let me paint the picture. Dave was my old college roommate, the guy who once thought a rice cooker could also cook ramen, pizza, and once, very nearly, laundry. We hadn't seen each other in years. Life had taken us in different directions. But here he was, standing in front of the automatic doors, holding a basket, wearing a t-shirt that said Grill Master, Beer Tester. "Dave," I said, still in shock. "The one and only," he boomed, pulling me into a hug so strong it nearly knocked the eggs, yes, more eggs, out of my bag. The ketchup. We stood there, blocking the entrance as shoppers maneuvered around us with their carts. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Same thing as you, man." "Stocking up. My in-laws are visiting, and apparently they eat like locusts." "Mine too," I muttered. "Well, not in-laws, just my wife. She eats like a general planning a campaign." Dave laughed. "Some things never change. You still hate shopping?" "Like a cat hates bath time," I said. It felt surreal. Years had passed, but with Dave it was like no time at all. At the tour of memory lane. We wandered into the produce section together. Dave immediately started juggling apples. Yes, juggling like we were still in college. A clerk glared at him and he quickly dropped them back into the bin. "Remember when we tried to make spaghetti in the popcorn maker?" he asked. "How could I forget? We nearly burned down the dorm. And that time we borrowed your neighbor's blender for margaritas and returned it with salsa still in it. We both laughed so hard that an elderly lady gave us a look, usually reserved for people who double dip at parties. It struck me how long it had been since I'd laughed like that in a grocery store. Or anywhere, really. The spouse factor. Then came the inevitable. "You married?" Dave asked. "Yep, she's the reason I'm here 2 days in a row." He grinned. "Nice. I'd love to meet her." "Be careful what you wish for," I warned. "She has a shopping list and she will draft you into service." At that very moment, as if summoned, my wife appeared. She'd gone to the bakery section ahead of me. She walked up with a loaf of bread in hand, giving me that "why are you laughing in a grocery" store look. "This is Dave," I said quickly before she could interrogate me. "The old college roommate. Dave, this is my wife." Dave beamed. "So you're the one keeping him alive." "Respect." She chuckled politely, though I could see the wheels turning. She was already calculating how much extra muscle Dave could provide with the cart. The reunion expands. Somehow we ended up shopping together. Dave tagged along, telling wild stories from our college days as my wife compared prices, and I pretended to be useful. Every aisle was a memory lane. In the cereal aisle, "Remember when you lived off Lucky Charms for a month?" In the cleaning aisle, "Hey, didn't you once try to wash dishes with shampoo?" In the frozen section, you told everyone your freezer burn was a new flavor. By the time we reached the dairy section, my wife was laughing too. The stories kept spilling out and she seemed entertained, which in grocery terms is a miracle. On the queue, again. And then, because all roads in this story lead to the checkout, we reached the queue. Of course it was long again. Of course the oversharer was there. Of course the toddler saw me and yelled, "The Eggman!" Dave nearly doubled over. "Eggman? What's that about?" I buried my face in my hands. It's a long story. My wife, enjoying my suffering, explained the bread and egg incidents in detail. Dave was laughing so hard I thought he'd need medical assistance. "Classic you," he wheezed. "Some things never change." A moment of reflection. As we stood there, 3 carts deep in the queue, I realized something. The day before, standing in line had felt like torture. Today, with Dave there, it felt like a reunion, a reminder of younger, sillier days, a chance to laugh at myself instead of groaning. Maybe that was the hidden gift of these long queues and repeated trips. Not just the groceries, not just the forgotten eggs, but the people you stumble into along the way. Bravo. Bid the farewell. Eventually, we checked out. Dave had to rush. His in-laws were waiting, and his basket was full of chips, beer, and exactly 1 cucumber, which he claimed was for balance. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot. "Let's not wait another 10 years, Dave said. "Deal," I said, and we meant it. As he drove off, my wife turned to me. "You know, that was nice." "Yeah," I admitted, "almost makes the whole forgotten egg thing worth it." She smirked. Almost. Back home again. When we got home, we unpacked the bread, the fruit, and a few unnecessary extras that somehow slipped in when Dave distracted me with stories. And as I flopped on the couch, exhausted but oddly happy, I realized something important. The supermarket wasn't just a place to shop. It was a stage, a circus, a reunion hall, a place where life, ridiculous, messy, hilarious life, kept sneaking up when you least expected it. Closing note of the chapter. And so, thanks to a forgotten carton of eggs, I had reconnected with an old friend. Thanks to a cue that should have been frustrating, I had laughed harder than I had in years. It wasn't just groceries, it was groceries plus. Groceries with a side of nostalgia, groceries with a sprinkle of fate, groceries with extra laughter, half price, unadvertised, and honestly, I wouldn't trade that reunion for all the eggs in the world. If you had told me a week ago that a grocery store queue would become the classroom of my life, I would have laughed in your face. Queues in my mind were punishment, wasted minutes, a slow-moving purgatory between you and freedom. But after all the chaos, the squeaky cart, the bread squish, the egg fiasco, and the reunion with Dave, I started to realize maybe queues weren't the enemy. Maybe, just maybe, they were teachers. Don't laugh. I mean it. Standing there, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, I picked up more lessons than I ever expected. Lesson 1. Patience is a muscle. Let's start with the obvious. Patience. Cues force you to wait. No shortcuts. No fast-forward buttons. Just you, your cart, and the universe's ability to test your blood pressure. In the early days of shopping with my wife, I treated waiting like a personal insult. How dare they make me stand here? Don't they know I have chips to eat at home? But slowly, I realized that impatience didn't make the line move faster. It just made me miserable. Patience, on the other hand, felt like a muscle. Weak at first, but stronger the more I used it. By the time I'd hit my third shopping trip that weekend, I found myself almost zen. Sure, the guy ahead of me was counting exact change in slow motion, but instead of seething, I just breathed. Watched the toddler giggle, listened to my wife, compare coupons, smiled at the absurdity of it all. Patience didn't come naturally, it came from cues. Lesson 2. Strangers aren't always strange. In most areas of life, strangers are background noise, people you pass, nod at, ignore. But in the queue, strangers become characters in your story. There was the oversharer turning small talk into confessions, the coupon general handing out unsolicited wisdom like it was war strategy, the toddler, my personal heckler. Each one started as random person number 7, but by the time I left, they were memorable. And Dave, my old roommate, I wouldn't have reconnected with him if I hadn't been standing in that exact spot at that exact moment. It hit me that the queue wasn't just about waiting. It was about sharing space, sharing stories, sharing a laugh, sometimes sharing too much personal information, looking at you, oversharer. But still, sharing. A lesson 3. Humor saves everything. Let me be clear. Grocery shopping can be absurd. Carts with minds of their own, shelves mysteriously out of stock. The eternal war between, do we need this, and it's on sale. Without humor, it's just a slog. With humor, though, every disaster becomes a story. Forget the eggs, hilarious, squish the bread, comedy gold, become a running gag for a toddler. Fine, let 'em laugh. I laughed too. The queue, especially, seemed to magnify humor. Maybe because we were all in it together, suffering equally, desperate for distraction. Laughter was the currency that made the waiting bearable. And it wasn't just about joking. It was about being okay with being the joke. Once I stopped worrying about looking silly, everything became lighter. Lesson 4. Together is better, even in line. The truth is, standing in a queue alone feels endless, but with someone, my wife, Dave, or even a chatty stranger, it feels different. When you're with someone, the line isn't a wall. It's a pause, a break, a chance to talk, to share, to laugh about the absurdity of buying 15 cans of beans. It reminded me of road trips. The drive itself is long, boring, sometimes frustrating, but with the right company, it becomes part of the adventure. Maybe that's what the queue really is, a road trip but on foot, surrounded by shopping carts. Lesson 5. The small stuff matters. Here's the biggest surprise of all. When I look back on these shopping trips, I don't remember the big things, the total cost, the size of the haul, the exact meals we planned. I remember the little things, the squeak of the cart wheel, the toddler pointing and laughing, my wife's triumphant smile when she found a discount, Dave juggling apples until they nearly smashed on the floor, even the cashier who deadpanned, "Big shop today?" when I bought only eggs. Those little moments, the tiny hiccups, the jokes, the human quirks, ended up being the real treasures. Maybe life works the same way. You don't remember every detail of every day. You remember the bread you squished, the eggs you forgot, the friends you stumbled into. The queue taught me that too. A queue philosophy. If I had to sum it up, I'd say the queue became a metaphor. Life is a lot like standing in line. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. Sometimes you're behind someone slow, sometimes you're the slow one. You can grumble or you can laugh, you can ignore everyone, or you can strike up a conversation. And at the end of it all, you move forward, always forward, one beep of the scanner at a time. The conversation with my wife. That night, as we were unpacking yet another round of groceries, I told my wife what I'd been thinking. "You know," I said, "I think I've actually learned things from the queue." She raised an eyebrow. "From the queue?" "Yeah, patience, humor, paying attention to small moments, stuff like that." She smiled, not her "you're being ridiculous" smile, but her softer, thoughtful smile. "See," she said, "shopping isn't just about food. It's about life," I groaned. "Don't get philosophical on me." She laughed. "Too late. You started it." The quiet moment later, when the house was quiet and the groceries were tucked away, I sat there thinking about the day, about the week really. So much fuss over something as ordinary as shopping, and yet it hadn't been ordinary at all. It had been funny, messy, frustrating, heartwarming. It struck me that the queue, the dreaded, boring, unavoidable queue, had been the thread stitching it all together. Without it, I wouldn't have laughed with strangers, wouldn't have met the toddler heckler, wouldn't have reconnected with Dave. Maybe queues weren't wasted time. Maybe they were hidden time. The kind of time you don't plan for, but that surprises you with meaning when you least expect it. Final thought of the chapter. So now, when I think about the queue, I don't just think of standing there bored, sighing, watching the clock. I think of lessons tucked between grocery carts. I think of laughter echoing between aisles. I think of patience, humor, strangers who aren't strange, and the joy of little things. And for the first time in my life, I almost looked forward to standing in line again. I thought the story would end at the supermarket. That's where the drama had unfolded. The squeaky carts, the bread squish tragedy, the egg fiasco, the oversharer's life confessions, Dave's juggling act, the toddler heckling me as Eggman. Surely once we got home, it would all quiet down. But if I've learned one thing, it's this. Groceries don't just stay in the store. They follow you home, and at home, they're worse. The Great Unpacking Showdown. The moment we walked in the door, my wife transformed into a field commander. Produce in the fridge, dry goods in the pantry, bread on the counter, not squished this time, milk upright. Don't just throw things in there. I, meanwhile, became her reluctant soldier, balancing bags on both arms like I was reenacting a CrossFit competition. Unpacking groceries should be simple, but in our house it's a gauntlet. First, the fridge. Too small, too crowded, and already containing mysterious leftovers that no one admits to owning. The fridge is like an escape room. You can put things in, but good luck taking them out later. Why is there salsa on the top shelf? I asked. Because it fits there, my wife said. No, it balances precariously there. Look, and of course, I knocked it over immediately, baptizing the butter in a salsa tsunami. Strike one. The pantry puzzle. Then came the pantry. The pantry is a lawless wasteland where pasta goes to retire and cereal boxes lose their dignity. Somewhere in the back, there are beans that expired during the previous presidential administration. Put the rice next to the pasta, my wife instructed. Which pasta? We have 7 kinds, all of them. In order. What is this? The Library of Congress. I shoved a bag of rice onto a shelf and instantly triggered a landslide. Out came spaghetti, penne, and something called ancient grains that looked like birdseed. Strike two. The egg redemption. Finally, the eggs. The cursed, fateful eggs. I carried the carton like a newborn child, placing it delicately into the fridge. There, I said proudly. No disasters. Redemption. My wife peeked over my shoulder. You know that's the freezer, right? I froze, pun intended. The eggs were already frosting over like tiny snowballs. Strike three. Dave drops. We're in. Just as I was considering retiring from grocery duty forever, the doorbell rang. It was Dave. Of course it was. Still grinning, still wearing his Grill Master beer tester shirt and holding a bag of chips like it was an offering. Thought I'd swing by, he said. My in-laws passed out from eating. Figured I'd check if you survived the great Q wars. My wife welcomed him in. I groaned. The last thing I needed was a witness to my unpacking incompetence. But Dave, being Dave, jumped right in. Need help? I'm basically a pro at unpacking. I once fit a whole keg into a mini fridge, and suddenly it was chaos squared. Dave helped by stacking cans into a tower. He declared it structural, art. The tower collapsed instantly, nearly braining the cat. He found my wife's carefully labeled spice jars and rearranged them alphabetically, starting with oregano because he liked how it sounded. See? He said proudly. Efficiency. I considered hurling an egg at him, frozen, so technically a weapon. Dinner disaster. Eventually, everything was crammed into place, or hidden, or teetering dangerously. That's when my wife announced, "Let's make dinner. We've got all these fresh ingredients now." Dinner sounded nice, relaxing even, until I remembered. Cooking in our house is less culinary experience and more reality show challenge. She started chopping vegetables with speed and precision. Dave manned the stove, whistling cheerfully. I was assigned the humble task of opening a jar. You'd think that would be simple. You'd be wrong. The jar lid would not budge. I twisted, I tapped, I begged. At one point, I tried the wrap it in a towel method, which resulted in nearly flinging the jar across the kitchen. Meanwhile, Dave flipped something in the pan like a pro chef. My wife had 3 pots going at once. The toddler from the store wasn't there, but I swear I could hear his ghost laughing at me. Eggman can't open a jar. Finally, after a Herculean effort, the lid popped off, spraying juice all over my shirt. Victory, I wheezed. Tragedy, my wife muttered. The meal that ate us dinner was chaotic. The rice overcooked. The sauce bubbled like lava. Dave dropped a spoon into the pot and declared it extra flavor. And yet when we finally sat down, plates steaming, glasses clinking, something amazing happened. It was good. Not just edible, good. Better than good, great. We laughed through the whole meal. My wife teased me about the eggs. Dave reenacted my jar battle. Even the salsa-soaked butter became a running joke. Spread some spice on your toast, anyone? For the first time, the groceries felt less like chores and more like fuel. For food, yes, but also for stories. The final reflection. Later, after Dave left and the dishes were done, I collapsed on the couch, exhausted, full, happy, and it hit me. This whole shopping saga, the squeaks, the squishes, the cues, the fiascos, wasn't about groceries at all. It was about everything that happened around the groceries. The people, the laughter, the unexpected reunions, the toddler calling me Eggman, a name I'll apparently never live down. The groceries were just props. The queue was the stage. The comedy was the script. And we were the cast, fumbling our way through a ridiculous play. To the punchline ending. As I drifted off to sleep, my wife called from the kitchen. "Hey, did you remember to get toilet paper?" My eyes snapped open. Number. No, I had not. And somewhere, I swear, the toddler's ghostly laughter echoed again. Eggman, forgot the toilet paper. Fade to black.